5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Ahoy, everyone. My name is Bobby Shortle, and I'm here with Nick Rocco Scalia, and we are the Intrepid Filmographers. Every mini-series, we chart a course through the full filmography of an under-discussed genre or journeyman filmmaker. In this expedition, we do our best to try and be explorers, using our years of film knowledge to help guide us, but always being open to discovering new things about the medium we love so much. We are currently embedded in the films of Ben Affleck, and today we head to Iran for his third feature, the Academy Award-winning Argo. And Argo, fuck ourselves.
Oh, you beat me to it.
Nick, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to talk about this movie. I was hoping this would happen. We first talked about the show months ago, and I was like, this is going to be great because I'm going to see some filmmaker stuff where I just hadn't seen their work before. Maybe I'll discover some new things and a new filmmaker to consider myself a fan of. And what's actually happened is this is the third Ben Affleck movie that we've done, the third one of his that I've seen. And I was talking last episode about being a Ben Affleck fanboy, and now I feel like this solidifies my Ben Affleck fandom.
All right. For me, I think this is my least favorite of the three. I still think it's really good. This is the first time I've watched it since 2011. Is that when it?
12. But
2012.
Me too. Yeah.
It wasn't as good as I remembered it. But that doesn't mean I didn't like it. I liked it a lot. I just want to say that this is one of those weird things, right? This is our first, of course, this is obviously our first Academy Award winner for Best Picture that we're covering on the show. We probably won't cover that many of them as we go across with the filmmakers that we are planning on covering, right? The type of filmmakers that we're covering.
The Oscars make some strange choices. And look, I thought going back to this one, this was going to be one of those Oscar movies where it's like, what were they thinking in 2013, in February 2013? And seeing it again, I don't know, it got better for me. Like I remember liking it a lot. And when it won the Oscar, I was like, okay, that's a safe, but okay. I think a lot of the Best Picture winners are very safe choices. But looking at it years later, I think it actually, this is a Jennifer's Body for me, where it's like, I always liked it, but it's just kind of grown in stature since I saw it the first time.
What you mean? You talking about? We'll cover Best Picture again when we do our Michael Herfacious series.
Has he made anything else? It would be a very easy series. I think he made some other movie after that.
He must have made other movies than just that movie, just The Artist, right?
Which Hollywood I'm sure is great.
Have you ever seen The Artist?
Nope.
Oh, it's fine. But it's just kind
Safe
of like
choice.
Hollywood went insane. It's not even a safe choice. It's a silent movie. It's insane. Hollywood just went insane that year. They were like, this guy, this movie, these people, they're the new kings of Hollywood.
Yeah. Lasted a long time too. Let them reign for 1,000 years.
Yeah. I mean, I remember it got nominated for, I think it won Best Screenplay. And I remember our friend Brian, who we talk about all the time, was like, I don't understand. Nobody speaks.
Well, they wrote some really good action
stage
lines.
Direction. Yeah, exactly.
Yep,
I was like, well, there's a screenplay is more than just dialogue, but still, it is a little crazy that movie with no dialogue won Best Screenplay. It did win Best Picture. It was a bit of a surprise when it won Best Picture, right?
We're talking about Argo again.
Argo, yes, back to Argo. Yeah. It was not a surprise. The Artist was like a juggernaut that year. Like that was one of those weird things where it was like, no, this is the Best Picture winner. Don't we all agree? We all had to be like, oh, okay, I guess. I guess it's The Artist.
What was it up against? Do you remember? There were conceivably
Argo or
other...
The Artist?
The Artist. Well, we'll get to Argo.
Okay, I was about to go over the what was what year was The Artist? 20 is the next? Is not the next year? Is it?
It was either the year before or the year after.
Let's see. No, it's the year before because the year after is 12 Years a Slave.
That's a good one.
A great one. That was the 12 Years a Slave.
That should have won
year.
Best Picture. Yeah.
Yeah. So 2012 maybe, I guess, or is it the year after that? No, it's 2012. 2012 Oscars, 2011 movies.
Movie came out in 2011. Okay.
Yes. So let's Jean Dargin or whatever won that year. Let's see, but let me go.
These people are probably huge in France. Do you just not like the French?
I'm sure they are. I'm fine with the French. I like the movie. It's just insane.
You seem very dismissive of this movie. That's it's a Best Picture winner.
It is a Best Picture winner. He won Best Director. Michael Hazanavicius won Best Director over Terrence Malick for The Tree of Life. So, let's just take a step back. But let's see. Where's picture? Here we go. Best Picture. The other nominees that year are The Descendants, the Alexander Payne film.
Great movie.
Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, because it was what's his name? Who the heck was the director of the guy who made Billy Elliot?
Stephen Daldry,
because all his movies get nominated for Best Picture. So
I actually, I don't think I've ever seen it. Great book though.
I've never seen it either. The Help, which was obviously was a big hit that year. Hugo, the Martin Scorsese children's film. Midnight in Paris, the Woody Allen film. Moneyball, which is a great film. The Tree of Life and Warhorse were the nominees.
Warhorse,
and that's just the Spielberg nomination. They're just going, Spielberg made a movie, it gets nominated for Best Picture. This is how it works.
That movie, I don't mean to be dismissive of that one. I think that movie was good, but I remember literally not a frame of it.
No, that movie is fine. It's just.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's very competent. Spielberg's a good director.
That was the year he made that, and I believe that's that and what's it called here? Tintin, here.
Yeah.
Tintin is a cool thing.
Still haven't seen that. Like, I'd probably be more inclined to watch that than Warhorse again.
Yes, absolutely. I would suggest it.
I would love, if anyone's listening right now, let us know the last time you saw Warhorse.
Never is going to be probably most people's
answer.
This
is probably the first time it's even been mentioned in 10 years. I mean, a full 10 years.
Yeah. So the Best Picture, let's go over what was nominated for Best Picture the year Argo won, the movie we're talking about this week on the Intrepid Filmographers. It was another kind of weird year. Amore was nominated, which is that Haneke? Haneke
yes,
movie?
Yeah. Which is probably a great movie, but there is like no shot in hell I'll ever watch that.
No. It seems incredibly sad.
No, not doing it.
By
Love funny games.
A director who's known to be incredibly brutal. So I'm assuming it's not like.
Well, that's the thing. But like I like the brutality he did in everything up until that, and I was like, I'm sure it's great. Never gonna watch it.
Yeah, I saw The White Ribbon.
I still need to see that one.
After it won, I guess it won the Palme d'Or, right? I think is what it won. I wanted to see it, and I'm sure if I watched it now, I would have an appreciation for it. When I saw it then, I was the most bored I've ever been in my life.
He's a slow cinema guy. I like that about him. Beasts of the Southern Wild. Oh, great movie. Forgot
a movie
about
that I feel like is completely forgotten, right, at this point.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I know those filmmakers went on, did a couple other things, but like you never really hear about the Ben Zeitlin, I think the guy's name is.
Ben Zeitlin, who was nominated for Best Director that year. He's probably the one that gets in over Affleck that year, which is the big controversy.
You can only have one Ben, and he's got an H in his name, so it's like just give it to that guy.
Yeah,
that movie's crazy though, because it was made for like $25 and it looks incredible.
Yeah, Django Unchained, Les Miserables, Life of Pi, Lincoln, Silver Linings Playbook, and Zero Dark 30.
Some solid movies in there.
Very solid movies. Zero Dark 30, the movie of that year that was supposed to be was sort of projected to be the front runner, right? And then when it came out,
CIA-sponsored propaganda flick that year, you could only give Best Picture to one. So
and they gave the one that had some funny stuff in it.
Yeah. Zero Dark 30, not a humorous movie.
Right, but Bigelow's coming off of just a few years before that, right? The Hurt Locker. So she's, become an Oscar person. So everyone thought that was going to be the big movie that year, and it just didn't end up being that. It was a weird year, right? Because, obviously Argo wins Best Picture. Its director isn't even nominated for Best Director, which was a big controversy at the time. I remember people being kind of surprised because he won the DGA, right? Affleck?
Yes. Yeah.
Which is usually very predictive of at least being nominated, if not winning the Best Director Oscar, right? But the winner that year was Ang Lee for Life of Pi. Michael Haneke was nominated. Ben Zeitlin was nominated. Steven Spielberg was
Ang Lee
nominated
for like a mid-tier Ang Lee movie.
Yeah, and then Spielberg was nominated for Lincoln, and David O. Russell for Silver Linings Playbook. This was in that run of David O. Russell where he was getting nominated every single year. People are like, can't do any wrong.
We liked that guy for a long time. He had a good run while it lasted. Yeah, probably never will work again.
No. Well, that whole time, even when he was popular, people were like, you know what he did, right? He like made Lily Tomlin like cry on the set of I Heart Huckabees. Just not a chill guy. David
Not a chill guy at all. Do like our I Heart Huckabees a lot though.
Yeah, I like a lot of his movies a lot. Like that's know that's one of those things where
Silver Linings Playbook's very good. Very
good. The Fighter is very good.
Yeah.
Even it's Silver Linings Playbook, but that was the end, I think, because like I mean, American Hustle came out the year after or 2 years after or whatever, and that movie got a bunch of nominations as well. But I feel like was the first time people were like, yeah, but like, is it really that good? You know? And then when Joy came out, it was just like, all right, we're done. Like this is the last time. American
Hustle is a very, very interesting double bill, I think, with Argo. Those two movies they're doing very, very similar things, different approaches, but it's these like news stories from before we were born that captivated the world very, very briefly, I feel like. And films taking a sort of comedic approach to what is pretty serious, real criminal and, political, geopolitical behavior. So I think that's I'd like to do that when someone gives me a theater and I can do double bills of whatever I want.
Yeah. I mean, it's a whole genre, right, of movies, right? What Argo is doing is something that, and I think a lot of the reason why it ends up winning Best Picture, not only because it's a movie in some ways about making movies, but it also is this very Hollywood, let's sort of inject a lot of charisma and charm into this serious topic, right? And that's very out of fashion now, right? That's not a thing that really happens anymore. Like if you're trying to make Argo now, I think there would, in the tone that this movie is made in, I think it would get a lot of flack, right? And it probably got flack at the time, but it was drowned out by the praise for it, I think. And I think, dealing with those kind of geopolitical issues in a glibber way, or would have been perceived as a glibber way, I think it would have gotten bad response. Even though I think when they're dealing with the actual serious stuff, the movie is pretty serious, right? The movie is like,
I mean, it functions very well as a political thriller. And there's also, as I was texting you a couple days ago, it's got some incredible one-liners in it. Like I didn't realize how quotable this movie was, but it's also like, one of the things that I think put it over the top is it's a movie about movies, and Hollywood is kind of high in its own supply and always has been. And I think that's the artist as well. I think definitely that's one of the reasons why that got the notoriety that it did. But like Argo is kind of a satire of Hollywood, but it's like the softest satire of like, everybody's a liar in this town, but they're all pretty good guys. They're not up to anything real serious, no bad stuff. Like Alan Arkin is a producer in this, a great performance, great character. He's super likable. And I don't know that there's ever been a producer quite like Lester Siegel, I think is his name.
Probably not.
He's an awesome guy. You'd want him to like be your dad, even though he says later in the film that he actually is not a very good dad.
He's not a very good dad at all. You think,
but he's a long way from the Weinsteins and the Robert Evanses of the world, I guess is what I'm trying to do. The Bruckheimers, and Don Simpsons, and
You think the religious police are bad? You should try dancing with the WGA. That's
my favorite. Let's just get it out of the way right now because it's so unimportant to the movie. But they go to his house the first time and he's like putting on a bow tie. He's like getting ready to receive an award from something. And Affleck's character and John Goodman's character come to see him and like, oh, that's a big honor. He's like, I'd rather stay home and count the wrinkles on my dog's balls.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know how I can slip that into conversation, but I will use that at some point and probably lose my job over it or something.
So Argo is the story of the CIA trying to get out 6 people who escaped from the American embassy when it fell in Iran. Everyone else in the embassy gets captured as hostages. These 6 people get away and they hide out in the Canadian ambassador's house. The CIA finds out about it and they decide to try to come up with a way to go in and get them out. Because
they send in their top man, Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck, yep.
American hero, Ben Affleck.
Latin American hero, Ben Affleck, to go to Iran, basically set up this fake, they come up with this fake movie, and give cover for these 6 people as, basically members of the film crew who are scouting Iran as a location. Affleck's character, Tony Mendez, has to go in, set them over their covers and get them out from the airport because it's the only way out. And I mean, that is really the story of the movie, right? There's a lot that happens that we're going to talk about, but that's the general overall idea of the movie and what happens. And it's a movie, I would say, filled with wonderful faces and character actors spread out all throughout it.
Oh man, what a great one scene actor movie. We were talking about Chris Cooper the last time around. Philip Baker Hall shows up for a little bit here. Richard Kind. It's a terrific cast, but you don't get to see a whole lot of really any of them except for Ben Affleck.
Yeah, I mean, Philip Baker Hall and don't forget Bob Gunton is there together. Yeah. A great pairing. But this movie, written by Chris Terrio, who Nick editorialized in his research as being like, I was so excited because I love this script. See all the great credits that Chris Terrio had.
I was so ready to go down the Chris Terrio rabbit hole. I knew the name. So I was like, okay, what else has this guy written? I'll bet it's other movies that I've really liked. And it's Batman v Superman, Justice League, and the crime against humanity that was Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And literally it's that stuff and this. Nothing else.
Well, he gets pulled in right to the Batman v Superman thing because originally...
Because Ben Affleck thought he was a great screenwriter, which I would have thought so too.
Well, that's part of it, but it's also because the idea was also Terrio would then become the screenwriter of The Batman, which was supposed to be directed and starring Ben Affleck. That was supposed to be his next movie after Argo. So it was like Chris Terrio didn't from scratch write Batman v Superman. He comes in when people start getting attached after Affleck gets attached to rewrite Batman v Superman, right? That's what happens. And then also comes over to Justice League for the same reason, right? Is to try to get these terrible scripts into some sort of shape, So
it's just such a shame. Like the Argo script is so sharp and so well constructed, and I mean, there's so much that it draws together, and it's I know it's not like there's a whole section on Wikipedia about all the historical inaccuracies in it, but I think for the story that the movie is trying to tell, it does such a great job of telling it. And, there are multiple tones here, and I think it balances them in a beautiful way. There's lots of great dialogue exchanges. I mean, I could totally see this, on the adapted screenplay or the best screenplay on the Oscars where they have the screenplay page being typed up, that stupid graphic that they do.
Yep. Oh,
and then they fade into the shot of the movie, they dissolve to the shot from the movie. You could totally see that so many, I could just pick left and right, give me a timestamp, and you could do that so effectively with this. So it's kind of a shame. I don't think he's that old of a guy. Maybe he'll come back someday, but Rise of Skywalker is a lot to atone for, I think.
I mean, also Rise of Skywalker is also a rewrite job, right? Rise of Skywalker is
don't justify it. It's a crime against humanity.
I mean, that's a terrible movie. I'm not justifying the movie at all, but I think if people don't realize how being a working screenwriter works in Hollywood, it's a lot of this, right? It's a lot of you work on something, they go, okay, it's great, we're gonna hire somebody else to come in and rewrite it. It's just what happens. And in this case, it was the same thing. They just brought somebody in. That movie was Rise of Skywalker was supposed to be a Colin Trevorrow film. Yes. I believe also he was writing it. I believe it was written and directed by Colin Trevorrow. And, whatever you may think of Lucasfilm and Kathleen Kennedy, Colin Trevorrow is a train wreck of a filmmaker. And so they were like, this is not what we want. We want you're going to get out of here. So they bring in Abrams last minute. And I guess Abrams brings him in, or the studio brings him in because they're like, look, you've worked on other big movies. And this is what happens too, is they go like, no matter how good the movie is, we know that you can take a script that we don't know how to make it into a movie and at least get it to a shooting draft that we can put in front of a director and actors and say, here, now you have something you can actually at least shoot, right? So that's why he gets brought onto that. And it's weird that he maybe just that run of those bad movies makes it people go like, well, we're going to keep your name off of things. from now on. But there's also
this could be like a rewrite guy.
Exactly. There's this whole cottage industry of like ghostwriter, like rewrite guys who don't get credited on stuff, who come in and they script doctor.
If you're going to do that though, then be John Sayles. Like, make your own movies that are awesome for very
we're
low
going to live in a different world than with the John Sayles world at this point. Anyway, that's Chris Terrio's story. He writes this screenplay in 2007, and the least shocking thing in the world, right, is that George Clooney is like, I want to make this movie. This seems like a George Clooney movie, right? That, like, his type of directorial film very much follows in this vein, which is, Good Luck is actually a very odd departure for him in some ways, because it is so just completely serious, right? It's serious from tip to tail, and usually he has sort of like, he loves historical stuff. He loves a little bit of like humor mixed in.
Three Kings and is it The Men Who Stare at Goats? I actually really like that movie.
Oh, he's in The Men Who Stare at Goats. He didn't direct The Men Who Stare at Goats, but he's in it. He may, like, you think about like Leatherheads, or you think about
do people think of Leatherheads?
Confessions of a Dangerous Mind.
That's a great movie.
These movies, he has this kind of historical but arch sort of vibe to him, right? So, and this would have to be right around the time. What year is Good Night and Good Luck? It's got to be around this time, right? Around 2007.
It's about 06 or so.
Yeah, so it's right after Good Night and Good Luck, which is a fantastic movie, obviously.
Yes, it is.
It's now they're doing a Broadway version of it, and Clooney is starring in it. So that's something.
Fun.
Yeah,
I won't be able to afford to go see that.
No.
But for you wealthy folks who see it, enjoy.
Yes. Affleck comes on in 2011, right after directing The Town. So interesting about Affleck, for the fact that he is such a big star moving into directing, he's really building a director career in a very traditional way, right? Very small movie that doesn't cost a lot of money, that he makes, that doesn't do great, but people like, right? And they're like, oh, this is a good movie. You can do this. Let's give you something a little bit bigger. Does a little bit of bigger movie, a little bit bigger cast, is much more successful, right? And so the people are like, okay, you've kind of proven yourself. Let's take the next step up, which is make something a little classier, right? Make something that's a little bit more, I'm assuming when they're making it, they're not thinking this is an awards movie, right? Because it doesn't feel like that.
It's a prestige movie, right? It's an actual, movie, it's a historical situation. We're moving out of the Boston noir world that he could have just done that his entire career. I mean, he's done two in a row, and they're both great, as we've talked about. But this really kind of expands the canvas a lot for him. I mean, it's his first period piece. It's his first kind of ensemble drama. I mean, there's elements of that in the other two films. I mean, he really does a great job of bringing casts together, and we see a lot of recurring players here, and actually a lot of recurring crew people. Uses the same production designer for all three of those movies. He tends to work with people. Titus Welliver comes back again. Which is fantastic. Yeah.
My brain did not clock these movies that Titus Welliver is in all of these movies.
No, me either. Like, he doesn't have a big part in it. Gone Baby Gone. He's a pretty significant character in that, but
he has a decent sized part in The Town too. They're both like pretty. This is a very like, he's just a guy in the room. You're like, oh, there he is. It's Titus Welliver. It's funny because he doesn't have that much screen time, but he doesn't have really that much less screen time than like Chris Messina or Kyle Chandler. Really, like they. Like,
I don't think. Yeah, Kyle Chandler was in like maybe two scenes or one and a half or so.
Yes.
Forgot he was in this movie. Like, it's fun to watch these movies. I felt the same about The Town and Gone Baby Gone. Like, you just forget so much about that. I don't know what it is. Like, and they all got better. I think they all not only held up, but kind of, as I said, got better over time. But like, I felt like I was almost seeing this one for the first time again too. And I remembered the story very well. I remember the airport escape, but like pretty much everything leading up to that, including this fantastic opening that this film does that I've never seen quite anything like that before. And I don't know, I would have thought that would have stuck with me a little bit more than it did at the time. Now I'll never forget it. Now, just the one-liners alone, I feel like this is going to be a go-to for me.
Yeah. Also, his buddy Victor Garber shows up for more than,
he's actually in this. Yeah, he has like a pretty significant role in this. Yeah.
Yeah, which is he's great.
Very good in it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's perfect for that kind of role. Again, Affleck, you said, Affleck, very good at casting, very good at knowing. We talked about this, previously, I think when we were actually way back when we were talking about Girl Fight, which is that when people aren't going to be on screen for a long time, you got to have like good faces and just like good presences there who can fill in sort of an audience's information about a character just from the way they are, right? Whether they're bringing a screen persona that people know, or just they've got an interesting face and an interesting vibe, and they're just sort of like, okay, like this is more than just a day player coming in and saying a line, right? There are none of that here. Everybody is mostly somebody who's been in other movies with bigger parts at some point, right?
Well, just the hostages alone. You got Scoot McNairy, who we've talked about on the show before. Love that guy. Reunited
Destroyer.
Carrie Bechet from *Halt and Catch Fire*, a great series that nobody's ever seen except
also
me.
Scoot McNairy is from *Halt and Catch Fire* as well.
Yeah, so I said he was reunited.
Yeah, I hear the reunited. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Clea Duvall is in this. Kate Donovan. Like just there's 6 hostages alone. It's pretty cool. Again, Zeljko Ivanek, who plays one of the like CIA guys or State Department guys.
Yeah.
He's in like 2 or 3 scenes, but like every line is perfect. Like it's like all of these really great little roles. And
Cranston.
then Bryan Cranston, right? I forgot he was even in this movie. He's Ben Affleck's boss. He's in a lot of scenes actually. Yeah. It's similar. Like this is same year as Drive, I want to say.
I think no, doesn't Drive 2011.
2000. So okay, so it's the Drive era. Pocket. It's right when Breaking Bad is on TV, and hey, here's Bryan Cranston for you.
Yeah, Bryan Cranston, who never will really have the movie career you expect him to. Like that's really what this era is kind of about. He really. It just turned out his particular screen presence is much better suited, I think, to television than it is to movies. He's good in this movie. Don't get me wrong, he's not bad in this movie, but he just never, I think, figured out how to be like a movie guy. He
doesn't get to do much in this. I love his performance in Drive. I think it's
he's
surprisingly soulful role for what that part is. It's kind of an underwritten part, but he brings a lot to it.
Yeah.
This one, there's just no there. I mean, it's that role could have been played by almost anybody, but hey, Bryan Cranston's pretty hot TV property right now. Let's put him in the movie.
You get a good face in there. Get a good actor in there to do it. Like it doesn't make your movie worse to get a good actor playing a small role, right?
I mean that's why Kyle Chandler's in this, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Too. Yeah, exactly. Kyle Chandler also on TV at this point in a buzzy, show. Yeah. He's in Friday Night Lights at this point. He is also a guy. They're like, is this guy going to be like a movie star guy? And similarly, they never really figured it out, right? They never really figured out how to use him and deploy him in stuff like this. But again, all solid, good presences to have in this movie. It's one of those movies where you just always feel like you're in sure, competent hands, right? That's what it feels like always, because every actor in it is somebody that you recognize in some way, right? So this movie cost about $44 million to make. It's shot in LA, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Istanbul. Obviously not shot in Iran in any way. Shot
maybe
on film.
They scouted locations there though. Yeah, beautiful looking movie. Shot on film, a lot of different film stocks, but everything period appropriate, or at least something that looks like it's period appropriate. And I'm a big appreciator of that. I'm sure you are too.
Yes, of course.
It's kind of a lost art, and I'm sorry to keep filleting Ben Affleck on this show. Like I'm sure we're going to get to some way worse movies. I've heard nothing good about Live by Night, and I'm sure Air is competent, but not super exciting. But just the choices that he makes are such good choices. And he really, I saw an interview with him the other day. I forget what he was saying. I think it was about film preservation, actually. And he was just like coked out of his mind. Like I couldn't really make sense of what he was saying. I think I agreed with it, but it was just like a mile a minute. And like, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he had a couple double esposos or something. I don't think that's what
Dunkin',
it was.
Man. Yeah,
that's it.
Dunkin'.
He's a Dun King.
He is a Dun King.
Love that commercial, by the way. But like, I don't know. I just, for his third movie, for the guy who he is, for as laughable as he kind of was as a public persona for so many years up till he started making movies, like this feels like the work of a real serious director who really speaks the language well. I mean, I think, there's very few flaws in the direction of this movie. And actually, he's good in this movie. I thought he was the weak link in the town. And this part being kind of not as showy a role, he's really an audience surrogate. Like, he's the hero of the movie in some sense, but he's pretty soft spoken, and everything happening around him is kind of what's making the story happen. He's just kind of spearheading this operation, the what do they call it? The Canadian caper or whatever.
The Hollywood option, I believe, is what that's what the official name of it, I guess, is.
Well, I've heard it also called the Canadian caper. They really left the Canadians out of this movie if you want to compare it to the real story.
Yeah.
They get like a little title at the end. But I think he's a perfect presence to be in this, because he's just so, like, you don't want that to be a showy role. You don't want that to be an overstated performance. And it's kind of a nicely understated performance. Like, he even directs himself well in this movie, I feel like.
So it's funny because we are opposite between the town and this. Like, I like him in the town. My problem with him in this movie is that I just feel like he's too understated. Like, there's that scene where he's trying to convince the people that, like, he's their only option and that they have to listen to him or they're going to die. And he has the exact same tone of voice that he has when he's talking, like, to somebody on the phone, about, like, his taxes or something. Like, it's just, he doesn't have any levels, right? He needed to give me a little bit more. He is too much of a cipher for me in this. There's just moments where his character, the script calls on his character to be a motivator in moments, or to really sell the gravity of a moment. And in those times, I could really feel him being like, I'm not doing the Ben Affleck thing. All the charisma squashed down. This is serious internal acting,
But isn't that true to the character? I'm like, what I love, one of my favorite things about the movie is
I don't know Tony Mendez. So
no, I don't know him either. But the way he's presented, obviously he's dead. Rest in peace, Tony Mendez. Wrote the book that this movie was based on.
Yeah.
But there's an early scene where Bryan Cranston, who's his boss, brings him into the State Department and says, "This is my exfiltration specialist." And the thing is, he's never done it before. Like, I guess he's. And they never really explain it, right?
Well,
like,
no. He's done it before. He just has never done this particular. That's what he's saying when they go, like, "You ever done a lot of these before?" He goes, "Not like this."
But that's what I mean, right? And I think it's this sort of lack of self-confidence that's really interesting about him. And if he just, like, got in there and was, like, charismatic and motivational the way I think you want him to be, I don't think it would have made sense in the story. Like, he's a pretty regular guy. He's kind of an everyman who just happens to work for the CIA, and I really like that about him.
I don't know. Like, he's a CIA operative in which his specialty is getting people out of countries in weird ways. Like, that is what he does, right? He's obviously good at his job, or they wouldn't bring him into that meeting. He also,
but is he?
Yes. Where are you getting this idea that he does not good at his job?
It's the way that it's coded. So that the scene that we meet him in, it's this scene that we've seen in so many movies where we're just, like, panning the camera over. He's in an apartment. He's passed out on his bed. There's beer bottles everywhere and empty Chinese food boxes. And it was like, okay, so this guy's an alcoholic, or he's going through a rough time. He's depressed or something like that. It's a very common scene that we see all the time. Exactly. He's Ben Affleck circa 2005 or so.
Yeah.
And I get the sense that this character is just kind of down on his luck a little bit. Like, I never got the sense that he was really good at his job.
I mean, they say he's the best person in the CIA at exfilling people.
This movie is about lies, and everyone's a liar in it. I think that's the comparison that's making.
I think
these professional liars and the Hollywood people, where everyone is lying at all times. Like, I think in the CIA, and I don't want to get into my feelings about the CIA, and their role in this movie kind of grosses me out a little bit, but I do think it's the kind of organization where somebody who's just like, a person who keeps their head down and just kind of gets by can, he's not getting himself in any trouble. Exactly.
Nick, you are like creating a narrative about this guy that is nowhere in the text of this movie.
I think it is. I think it's very much there.
He speaks up in a meeting of, like, super high level people, and he's like, "You can't do this fucking bike thing. It's dumb as shit. Like, you're not going to be able to get out, like this. Like, that's dumb." Like, he.
So they ask him, "What's your idea?" And he says, "I don't have one."
He doesn't have one right now because he just got brought into the meeting. He doesn't have an idea. They just brought him in the meeting. Like, what? I don't know. Like, this is like the thing I do like about him is that I do feel like he is a accurate, smart person, because there's something meaning where that person goes like, you know, what about, I think I wrote it down. He says like the school idea, right? And the person making the school, he doesn't go like, that's a dumb idea, like he did with the bike idea. He goes, it's actually a pretty good idea, but they closed that school.
Would have worked 6 months ago.
6 months ago, it would have worked. I liked that, right? I think like, I think you have to take at face value that Bryan Cranston isn't lying, that this guy is the best is the X-Fill expert, right? Like, because why else would they even go with his insane idea? You know?
See, but like that's what I think. Like he comes up with this thing which is bullshit, and then the plan revolves around bullshit. And I don't know. It's like
they gotta be good at lying.
He finds in himself this ability to bullshit
I don't think
effectively.
That's not that kind of movie. It's not that kind of movie where like, because the problem is like, I think Tony is incredibly a cipher, right? Because Tony doesn't change or grow at all in this movie, right? That's the thing. Like, and he doesn't have to. This is not a movie about Tony changing or growing, right? That's not what this movie is about.
Definitely not a character piece at all.
No, not at all. And I don't want him to be like, hey, I'm like super like smooth and great, like a movie spy, right? That's not what I'm looking for. I just think like his level is very like, it's very like mono for most of the movie, which I'm fine with. But there are just moments where in any screen performance, especially in a movie like this, where you have scenes where they're very theatrical scenes, like where we're not like in gritty realism, most of the time here. The script asks for a little bit more, and I feel like Affleck is self-directing himself, being like, I'm not doing the thing. I'm not gonna turn on the charm. I'm not gonna turn on the thing. I'm gonna keep it stamped down. And I think that's not a bad instinct to have for him, but it's one of those times where I feel like him self-directing himself creates a worse performance for him, because I feel like if he was watching another actor do that, he would coach them differently, right? He would direct them differently. Or if this movie was directed by someone else, they'd be like, you need to give me a little more, Ben, in this moment. So Ben's performance, to me, I like Ben Affleck. We talked about this as an actor. I just feel like it's so understated to the point of flaw for me. Like, there are moments where I'm like, dude, like, I wouldn't go with you in this moment. And I know that you're right, and I have the information that you are correct, but I'm like, when Scoot McNairy is like, I don't trust this guy. And he's like, come on, you got to trust me. I'm your only hope. And I'm like, all right, man, like, come on. It's like my life is at stake, and this is all you're giving me in this moment, So
yeah, I like the choice, and I take it as just his inability to have that confidence, to be so sure of himself in this situation where there are lives at stake. I think it's a good performance. I really, and I thought he was way overdoing it in The Town, and here maybe he's shifting a little too far in the other direction of keeping it understated, keeping it kind of quiet and soft-spoken, but I think it works for this movie. Like, I do not want some, really rah-rah patriotic, charismatic.
No, I'm not asking for patriotism. That's not what I'm asking for at all.
I understand.
I'm also like, look, I'm not bringing to this any sort of like, I think the CIA are all cool winners who do good stuff. Like, that's not where I'm coming from.
Good. I'm not either.
Obviously this movie is wrapped up in a lot of geopolitical stuff and a lot of American stuff that you can't really extricate it from. I think Affleck does or Terrio, who knows who puts this kind of stuff into the soup, but does a decent job of, at least in the beginning and a couple of other times in the movie, kind of being like, this is partly America's fault, right? That what is happening, right?
Not enough, but it's at least there.
No, but how much are you going to do? Like, you need the cooperation of the CIA. Obviously, they were part of the movie, so it's like, you can't make this movie the way you make it without cooperation from the CIA. You just can't do it, right? There's locations and ideas and stuff you just can't bring to bear, right? So I think that you have to look at it with a little bit of a side eye. Any movie about the military or the government that uses government buildings or hardware or whatever you've got to give it a little bit of a side eye, you know, to be like, there is obviously a little bit of smoothing over going on here, you know, for all of this kind of stuff, right? It's the same thing with Top Gun Maverick.
This
you know?
conversation about Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah. You know, obviously, look, and I'm also not here to say every person who works for the CIA is a dirty, lying rat who has bad intentions, right? I'm sure there are plenty of people who work in these government agencies, right, that go into it with the best of intentions, right? But the
Tony Mendez seems like a good guy.
Yeah. But the apparatus
maybe
is
a little unsure of himself, and maybe he's got a bit of a drinking problem. But
he's definitely got a drinking problem. That's for sure. He's got a drinking problem. But so we should move on to the opening scene, which is this. Well, first we get the credit scene, kind of before the credit scene, which is, or the before the credit scene, or the prologue, whatever you want to call it, where you're getting this sort of movie concept art history of Iran,
of Iran, of the conflict there. And I just,
Iran, yeah.
I mean, what this film is, just tonally, the fact that they're doing this as movie storyboards, I forgot about that choice, as I was saying before, and I love that. It's, you know, my great film professor Robert Lang always said you can tell everything about a movie in the first 30 seconds of any movie, but a good movie, right? And I think this one absolutely does that. It gives you, you know, what is this movie? It's a Hollywood story crossed with a sort of political story, political thriller, and there you go. Like, what perfect way can we signify that visually and auditorily in the first few seconds of the movie? Well, let's tell the history of Iran and the United States involvement in Iran using film storyboards.
Yeah.
Good choice.
It's, you know, it's a very good choice, you know, and it reminded me a little bit of, what's it called? Sort of in 2000 and I think in 2007, 2008, I think it's back-to-back years. There was Persepolis, right?
Which is just going to say Persepolis. Yeah. The animated movie about
the animated
exactly
movie based
that.
on the graphic novel, which is fantastic, you know, amazing movie.
Haven't heard anyone talk about that one in a while. Go back and watch Persepolis. That movie,
you should. It's really fantastic. And also Waltz with Bashir, I believe, was the next year, which is also an animated sort of like war movie. Reminded me of that, right? Those ideas. And Affleck has been pretty open about the fact that, like, you know, he's like, I'm going to take some ideas from other things that I think are great, which is not a problem at all. But I think it's really smart and does set tone. And you look, you need to give people some backstory about what's happening here, right? And like you said, it's a great introduction to this dual concept, right? This geopolitical thriller mixed with the movie thing. And then we go into the scene of the actual embassy and the moment where the embassy gets overrun, right?
Really tense scene.
Really tense scene. And does the thing, you know, we're doing these series, we're trying to look for these sort of hallmarks of the director, right? And in all three of his movies at this point, he does this thing at the beginning where he mixes like traditional, you know, narrative filmmaking with this sort of almost, you know, naturalistic documentary
style, handheld, very newsy looking style.
Yeah, and he does it here obviously to a heightened degree, because now we're in, like, we're not just interviewing a mother, we're not just kind of showing you Charlestown or whatever. We are showing you
the present day, and it has that vintage look to it as well. Really well done, I think. The cinematographer, this is Rodrigo Prieto, who's great anyway. I don't think he won the Oscar for Brokeback Mountain a couple of years before this, but he was definitely nominated for it.
Did he not win the Oscar that year?
I don't think he was. I think he was nominated.
You talk. I'm going to look it up.
I was just going to say, I think he does a really good job with this. What I was reading about it is, I guess they zoomed in, they shot on 35, but they zoomed it in to make it look like 16 millimeter.
Okay, that's what
then
they did.
Actually, they had people in the crowd with actual 16 millimeter Bolex cameras shooting some of that, you know, like you were saying, very documentary style footage of this, you know, the takeover of the embassy and people breaking down the doors and the walls and everything. It is an incredibly tense scene to start this movie. And it just kind of shows the genius of this movie, because there's moments later on that are so funny and so lighthearted and so just, you know, you described this as a great like Sunday morning watch kind of movie, but this opening scene is not that at all. Like Ben Affleck talks about like the political thrillers of Costa Gavras as being a big influence on this, and that's what this feels like. I mean, yeah, as you said, it's drawing from a lot of different sources, but if you're going to steal, you know, steal the right stuff. I say
Yeah.
that about Tarantino all the time, like people call him kind of a pastiche artist, but like the stuff that he's sticking together, I was going to say pastiching. I don't think that's a verb. I'd like to make it one. But
Yeah.
it's like they're perfect choices. And I feel very much like Ben Affleck is kind of doing the same thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to look. Rodrigo Prieto did lose that year. He has actually been nominated 4 times: Brokeback Mountain, and then for Silence, The Irishman, and for Killers of the Flower Moon, and he lost all of those. What year was that? 2006.
Brokeback was it came out in 05. Oscars
05.
in
So here we go.
06. Yeah.
Oh, it lost. It lost to Memoirs of a Geisha.
It's a nice looking
Dion
movie.
Beebe. Yes, I know, but that's one of those things where this is one of those reasons why people fucking hate the Oscars, where it's like nobody remembers Memoirs of a Geisha.
No, but the Oscars is a show for the general public, and to the general public, cinematography is a nice looking movie.
Yeah,
it's not telling a story through the use of the camera. It's not
yeah, but the people who vote for it are cinematographers.
I know, but
it's not like you have a fan vote.
I feel like they're kind of giving the people what they want. I think that happens a lot.
No, I don't think the people wanted Memoirs of a Geisha. That movie was a giant bomb. Anyway, so yeah, this opening scene, really tense, and like you said, and we get what I really like about it is we get our main players, but they're not the only people we spend time with in the opening scene, right? We have some scenes with other people we're not really ever going to see again, in these moments, like the security people and stuff like that. That being said, that one security guy is a giant dingus. When he's like, I'm going to go outside and talk to them.
Yeah, that's a good plan.
And then immediately gets like taken, and then it gets a gun pointed at his head, and he's like, open the door. I'm like, you lost like probably 10, 15 minutes. Like some more people would have gotten out if you hadn't just walked outside. But yeah, a good, a really good tense opening scene really sets up the stakes of the real stakes of what we're dealing with, right? Not because if you start on the other side, then I think the movie doesn't have the same impact. Because if you start with the funny stuff or the more, the more sort of like snappy stuff, or even if you start with the CIA part of it, and this is like a flashback or something, it doesn't, I think, have the same
No, we have to see the real event, the real people. And
yeah.
I will say, between this and the storyboards, like this was before my time. This happened a couple of years before I was born. And as I was saying about whatever the scandal was in American Hustle, I mean, I'm sure these were on the news like every day when they were happening. Like I knew about the Iranian hostage crisis, but like, it's a historical event by the time I came of age to watch movies and to understand stuff like that. And by like 4 or 5 minutes in this movie, you're so invested in this entire situation that, is like, it's history book stuff, right? But I think it's set up so well, and the stakes of it are set up so well. And like you said, it's those moments, right? The security guard, it's the people in the building, just the kind of workings of the embassy, the idea that, we have to burn all the documents. They're like smashing computers and, they're shredding, like it's a very tense paper shredding scene, which you tend to see in movies a lot, maybe more tense here. This is not the Wolf of Wall Street, right? Like lives are literally at stake. And one of my favorite things, there's a great movie called No Way Out from the 80s with Kevin Costner, where the entire movie, like a lot of the suspense of it is a printout where this picture of someone, I believe it's a CIA movie, right? Where there's a mole at the CIA and it's very slowly, the printer is very slowly printing out a picture of this person. And the big reveal of the movie is going to be who is the mole. And this movie kind of does that in a reverse sort of way where they shred the photos of these 6 hostages that end up getting out, going to the Canadian embassy, and people are like putting the shreds of paper. They get, they said sweatshop kits to stitch them back together, which is kind of a fascinating story in and of itself, little side story that's going on through this movie. Yeah. But I love those sort of things, the race against time where it's just like a photo, like an identity kind of thing, to sort of drive the ticking clock of the story.
Yeah. It's like, did you see Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy?
Yes, love that movie too.
The tensest thing in that whole entire movie is when Cumberbatch has to steal that folder from the agency, and it's the same type of vibe where it's like this guy is just literally walking into a building, taking something and walking out. That's all he's doing. And somehow they construct like this very tense scene around it. Right. And that's even without any
great scene like that in Oliver Stone's Snowden too, which didn't actually happen to the real Edward Snowden, but nice little dramatic scene in the movie. Yeah. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy was the year before this, right?
It was. Yeah. I believe it was the year before.
Great time for political thrillers.
Yes, it was. So we get this opening scene. Then we go to the United States where we meet all the bureaucrats, right? This is the Kyle Chandler and we get a little bit of the little bit with Titus Welliver and some other people, right?
Great banter in this scene. Love it.
Yes. Basically setting up what's going on, why they can or cannot take action, right? Then we kind of just pop forward, right? Like it's like, what is it? Like 60 days basically or something like that. Because when we meet Tony for the first time, it's like 60, 70 days later.
There is a time jump here. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you hear all through the movie, you're getting these actual real news reports, right? From the era that are going over what's happening, right? It's been 59 days. There are all of these ribbons all over the place. They're, supposed to symbolize, thinking about the hostages, bring the hostages home. And
do you remember the number of hostages they held at the embassy?
It was like 63. Okay. It was something like that. It was a pretty big number, right? It's a pretty big number of people.
And the interesting thing is that's what people cared about, right? Like it's that larger group of people just because it's a larger group of people.
Yeah.
And yet this movie is about the smaller group. It's about the minority.
No one knows about the 6 people, right? Intentionally.
Right.
And the whole concept is these 6 people are actually in way more danger than the 63 people who are captured, because that's international news. If they kill anybody from that, it's going to cause a worldwide crisis, right?
And that's what I mean. So I mean, they're basically gone already in some sense because no one knows about them, and it's but this movie, you could make a very interesting. I think there has been movies made about the hostages actually at the embassy, but here we're with this other, this clandestine group that's hiding out with the French ambassador, which, how big is that house?
Canadian ambassador,
right?
Yeah.
What did I say?
You said French ambassador.
Yeah. That could have been worse.
And this concept, right, that these 6 people, if they get taken, they'll just kill them, because that's nothing. But no one knows they're even there, right? They're basically already dead. So they won't even care about those 6 people. So we got to get these 6 people out, and we've got a shrinking amount of time, right? Because like you said, they're putting together this. I love that moment where the people in Washington are like, some fucking dingus kept a Facebook of everyone who worked at the embassy. And now they're putting it back together, and they're going to, sooner or later, they're going to figure out that they're missing 6 people, and they're going to know exactly what they look like, and the jig's going to be up, right? Plus, you have this sort of ticking clock, right, of this housekeeper that works for the Canadian ambassador, who is our Iranian, who they're worried about finding out that who these people actually are. Like, she knows these people are there.
A sympathizer.
Yeah. This is her home country. Like, who knows, where her sympathies lie in that way. And so, all these people have to basically live inside. There's a scene where they get really mad at Tate Donovan because he left the house for a second or whatever. And this all stuff really reminded me of COVID times a little bit, right? This idea of just being stuck in one place with this sort of nebulous threat that exists outside, and this idea that you're just kind of stuck here, and what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do about it, right? And
we don't see a lot of scenes in the embassy, in the Canadian not the embassy, the ambassador's house.
Yeah,
but I think he does a good job of kind of getting across just the way you start to lose your mind a little bit over time in a situation like that.
Absolutely.
And, at first they're just happy to have a place where they can hide out, and and it's safe, and it's, no one's really looking for them there. And then after a while, particularly Scoot McNairy's character, who is kind of signaled early on as the thinker in the bunch. He's and he feels very guilty because he brought his wife along. They were newlyweds, and they, he brought her to the embassy, and now they're in this situation, and it's he may not only be killed himself, but he's also going to get his wife killed. And it was totally his idea that they're there.
Yeah. And she asked him to leave before this happened. And he was like, no, this is good for me to be here. Like,
yeah, that's a great scene. That's a little bit, it's like midway through the movie. And we sort of realize, he's got this moral thing that he's going through, minor character, but ends up kind of being an interesting foil to Ben Affleck's character, because he's the one that's basically like, this is a stupid plan and it's not going to work and you're going to get us all killed. And why should we trust you, as you were saying before?
Yeah.
And I do like there's this great tension even with those characters, and we cut back to them like, I don't want to give him too much credit, but there's the way this film sort of balances what's going on there, which is pretty much tense all the way through, with the silliest Hollywood scenes in this movie, with the stuff that is the most entertaining, the most lighthearted. There's a great moment. How deep are we going into the story here? Because
we should go pretty deep.
I want to tell you about my favorite scene.
Okay, so I'm assuming it's one of the Hollywood scenes that you're gonna talk about.
Partially, yes.
Okay, so I mean, let's just say like I want to talk about one moment because it's one of the moments that for me didn't work before we move on to the Hollywood stuff. So it's like we have this meeting we talked about, right, where they're trying to figure out what to do. Affleck's character is in that meeting and he's kind of shooting down what they're talking about. Doesn't currently have an idea, right, for what they're going to do, but he doesn't like the ideas that they have. He calls his son, right? He's separated from his wife at the moment. Calls his son, and kind of like a cute moment, which I did like. He's like, what are you watching on TV? I'll watch it with you, right? That I don't mind at all.
No, I like that a lot. Yeah.
But
I get where you're going with this.
But the fact that the CIA operative who is trying to figure out the lives of what's happened to the lives of 6 people, gets his entire idea for saving them from watching 3 minutes of Battle of the Planet of the Apes. And he's like, oh, I got it. It's like watching a biopic where like,
I was just gonna say, it's like one of those music biopics where there's
Paul
a scene
McCartney
where
sees like a guitar in a window.
Walk the Line. It's the worst scene in Walk the Line where Johnny Cash literally walks by a shoe shine boy, like shining someone's shoes, and comes up with the song Get Rhythm right there. It's like, oh yeah, which is the first line in the song.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a moment in this that absolutely doesn't work.
Yeah. So like,
I was going to give you shit for criticizing my hero, Ben Affleck, but yeah.
and like, it's more of a,
can we put that on Chris Terrio?
A scripting thing. It's probably a scripting thing, right? But it's one of those things where I'm like, this is just a little too cute by half, right? This is just too, for a true story, right?
Yeah.
It's just a little bit too cute. A true story has such a serious thing happening, right? It's just a little too much. I think the plan is great. Is a ton of fun. Like, I like that idea. Obviously it's a real idea.
Have gotten to it in a different way. I agree with that.
There's just a million different ways they could have scripted that out to be less sort of like, really? Like, that's gets the whole idea from that.
But I do love the idea of an estranged father and his son watching the same movie, like remotely.
That I really liked.
That was really cool. Yep.
Yeah. And like, some good writing in there as well, where he's like, what'd you do at school today? He's like, nah, nothing. And he's like, well, you didn't do nothing. I'm like, I've had this exact same freaking discussion with my son. So I'm like, okay.
Literally had it with my 4-year-old earlier today.
Yeah. So that's like real. I like that. So, and I like when he goes back to the CIA, he's like, I got an idea. And they're sort of like, he's like a movie or whatever. And he's like, yeah, there's a company that we work with sometimes. And I like this idea of like this world that exists, right? Where it's like the CIA works with movie companies to do stuff. And I like that little bit of like conspiracy juice you got going on with that. And then he goes out to LA. He's like, you got to.
There's so much similarity there too, right?
Yeah,
this is a special effects guy, and what the CIA do? His book, Tony Mendez's book, is called The Master of Disguise.
Yeah,
which came out before the horrible movie The Master of Disguise.
I'm a turtle.
Boy, do I like that scene. Supposedly shot like on night, but I do. Yeah, like this movie does kind of make that connection there, right? Like, the CIA, they're masters of subterfuge, and Hollywood, they're great liars, as I was saying before. Like, that is their job, is to put on a show in some sense and pretend there's something that they're not. And there's a real synergy between those two worlds, I think, that's interesting, that you wouldn't think of, right? Because John Goodman he doesn't look like a CIA agent.
No.
In the same way that Ben Affleck does.
And this is where the movie, where I think, like, especially on the Hollywood end, does such a great job of the casting, because John Goodman shows up and I'm immediately stoked. I'm like, yes, John Goodman is here. This will be great. It doesn't matter what, even if the writing is bad, this scene will be great. These couple things, because John Goodman is great. He's a great screen presence, and I do like that the movie, this is the movie where at the time where the movie is at its most like, hey, we're doing like a 50s, like,
for sure, yeah,
back and forth. Every line is a witty joke line that we're flipping back and forth with each other, right? The whole like, oh, you want to set up a movie company, become a big shot and do nothing? You'll fit right in. I'm like, yuck. Like we're going real Hollywood
and
here.
This is before we meet Alan Arkin's character.
This is before we meet Alan Arkin.
Yeah.
So Alan Arkin shows up, this movie producer, and we already talked about it a little bit. And Alan Arkin, in this sort of like era of his career, we talked about how Hollywood went insane for the artist, right? There's just sometimes, not Hollywood, just America is like, this really old person who's been around for like 70 years, we're obsessed with them for like this like 10-year period or whatever, 5 to 10 year period. And we were definitely in that era with Alan Arkin, right? At the same, after A Little Miss Sunshine.
The world is a better place for it.
Don't disagree with you at all. I will say this. He's a ball in this movie. Don't get me wrong. He's a ball. The fact that he got nominated for an Oscar for this performance is banana pants.
Okay, here's my take. The fact that he didn't win that Oscar for this movie is banana pants.
He's just doing the Little Miss Sunshine thing again, but with a lot less depth going on in the character. The character is fun. I really like all his scenes. This is not like a qualitative talk on his performance. But I would have nominated Scoot McNairy over Alan Arkin in this movie for Best Supporting Actor.
Okay, I'll give you that. I don't know about over him, but he could have been co-nominated with him. Sure, I love Scoot McNairy. We've talked about my appreciation for that guy before on the show.
Get a human named Scoot McNairy.
That's probably why he's never nominated, right?
Like we can't nominate someone named Scoot McNairy.
I'm sure I said this the last time. I want to see Scoot McNairy and Skeet Ulrich in the same movie.
Yes, absolutely. You did say that last time for sure.
Skeet, yeah.
So
or they could do a podcast together.
Now we get sort of like really what is kind of like the most processy part of the whole movie, which is this. Let's get this fake movie production up on its feet. Let's pick, and again, a couple of these things, the way he finds the Argo script, again, is just a little bit too, like, the weird coincidences that happen in your life, the kind of moment where I'm like, they're reading a million scripts. You could have just done a shot where they're just like going through scripts sitting there, and he just is like, he's sitting there next to him, and he picks up one, and he goes, oh, what's this, whatever, and just sees it, and he goes, oh, guys, wait, I think I found one. Something where he's kind of like pushing scripts around, and just like, he sees the cover and he's like, this is the one.
When
he picks
agreed.
it up. It's like, it's just a little too much preciousness for a movie that otherwise doesn't have that going on. It's not a movie that is about weird happenstance coincidences that happen, right? That's not what the movie is about for the most part. So
no, these like moments of inspiration, I agree.
Yeah.
They're totally incongruous with everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of an interesting Hollywood period too. Like this is just post Star Wars. So I'm assuming that a lot of spec scripts at the time are just Star Wars knockoffs.
Oh yeah, for sure. It
should have actually been almost easier for them to find a script to work with here. I guess the one that they, in real life, the one that they chose was an adaptation of a Roger Zelazny novel from the 60s.
Okay.
So, classic science, like right in that same sort of era, which I think is pretty interesting. I guess maybe he just didn't want his name on the picture or something, or his estate.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have been cool to just have the real thing there.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah. But I'm sure there was some sort of rights or something they didn't want to go through, right? I don't really understand that. I mean, they've made up names for other people. They could have just made up, like Lester Siegel is not a real person. They could have just made up a famous science fiction author. It's like, we'll take the thing that's adapted from his book. Yeah, that makes sense. But so we get that, and they're like, okay, like we got storyboard. Oh, they go to, again, just shows up in a movie or a TV show. I'm all about it. You get a scene with Richard Kind, who is like the producer who owns the script. And of course, this is the scene, right, that like probably the Oscar clip, probably, right, for Alan Arkin when they showed it, right? Is this moment, this scene
Oh, I
where
love this scene.
he kind of goes
I love
after him.
Richard Kind.
Yeah, I love Richard Kind. Oh my God. Love Richard Kind so much.
Richard Kind lives up to his name. Retweeted
Yes.
a review I did of one of his movies once. Had some nice words to say. And yeah, I'm ride or die for that guy.
He's great. Love him.
Very good movie. Let me shout out this movie because nobody's ever seen it. It's called The Paper Store. And it came out in like 2019. And the dude from Gossip Girl, I think, is in it.
Penn Badgley?
Penn Badgley is the star of this movie, and it's really, really good. And it's like a zero budget independent movie about academia, and I loved it and gave it a glowing review in Film Threat. And people should see it. I don't even know where you would see it. I don't know if it was ever released anywhere, but there's got to be a way to find it. Check out that movie; it's great. Richard Kind is in it too.
I'm assuming.
Yeah, he didn't just like my review of this movie that he wasn't in. Okay.
That would have been extra kind of him. So they go to him. Great scene between them where they sort of like, you know, this is the whole concept of like everyone's a liar. So, you know, Richard Kind is basically lying to him about how much the script is worth, and he lies right back about this meeting he had with Warren Beatty.
Warren Beatty, yeah.
You know, where Warren Beatty tells him that MGM's sci-fi lineup is in the tank or whatever. And so he gets the script for even less. And, you know, I think Affleck's character Mendez, you know, I like this part where he goes like, look, we have a script, we have storyboards, you know, but like any Iranian, you know, guard or, you know, the government that's something they think that's something we couldn't just create in our basement.
There's Iranian people in Hollywood. So like we have to make this look like a real thing. Otherwise they're going to tell their friends back home that like, you know, they're bullshitting you, essentially.
So they rent office space. They set up a reading. They put things in the trades, right? And
the scene after that, just to give a little bit of credit to Alan Arkin and maybe justify that Academy Award nomination, the moment where he's talking with Tony outside, first of all, you know, Tony Mendez asks him, you know Warren Beatty? And he's like, yeah, I took a leak next to him at the Golden Globes once.
Great.
That's
I mean,
great.
that stuff is great.
But
Don't get me wrong.
No, but right after that, they talk about their kids and how he sees his kids twice a year. And I was a bad father. And it's a great moment. And I almost feel like there's a little bit of, you know, Alan Arkin's a famous actor. He's been in that world in his real life for a long time. And he says, you know, this is a business where like you can't wash it off when you go home. And, you know, it's just kind of a nice sort of human moment for that character. I like that a lot.
It's a nice scene. And I think it's more trying to fill you in on like, look at the parallels between him and Tony's life, right? The fact that Tony also can't wash it off when he comes home. You know, I'm a little bit, and this is one of those things, right? This is the Aaron Sorkin Studio 60 problem, right? Where it's like, yeah, I buy it when it's the CIA operative who has to see like the worst of humanity. This guy produces movies. Like he's not going to war every day. He's just producing movies.
He's lying through his teeth to everyone he knows, and he's putting on this persona. And I get that a little bit.
This is just like the little bit of the thing that Hollywood gets, I think, rightfully criticized for, which is like a little bit too like high on their own supply, a little bit too like, look how important everything we do is, right? Like that. That's my only problem with this scene is just like, I just can't buy that he and Tony have the same skeletons in their closet. You know what I mean? I just can't buy it. You know, and that's for me.
I mean, we've learned what producers' lives are actually like in the time since this came out, and I don't know. He's probably done some things he's really not proud of.
Yeah, but he doesn't. I mean, again, the movie is not coding him as somebody who's like,
no,
nasty.
He's a really nice guy, but like I said, there's this like deception and lying, and it is you know, it's a sleazy business, and I think
it absolutely is.
You're getting your hands dirty in a way that like at least, you know, the ideal of a CIA agent is you're doing it for a good cause, and if you're a Hollywood producer, you're doing it for money. So
you're doing it for the best cause, the movies.
Yeah, the pictures.
For the girl and the pictures, you know? Speaking of this is Ben Affleck related. So, you know, Ben Affleck and Matt Damon had Project Greenlight, right? That show for a couple of years where it was basically a reality show where they would find a filmmaker and they would get to direct a movie, basically, right? There was the
second conversation I've had about that show that no one remembers this week, literally 2 days ago.
So I don't remember what season it was, but it was one of the episodes where Damon and Affleck were actually there, right? And they were sort of like talking to the people or whatever. And they brought up, I believe it was like Bob Weinstein, not Harvey Weinstein, but they were, you know, because it would end up being a Dimension film, whatever the film got made from in this section of time, because they had like a deal with them. I don't know if it was Feast or not, or if it was Battle for Shaker Heights or whatever of the
How many of the Project Greenlight movies did you see?
I saw Battle for Shaker Heights and I also saw Feast. I saw both of those movies.
Yeah, I did too. They're not good.
No, not really.
All that work, and that's
great concept. Like, I like the concept of the show. I just feel like they tried to bring it back, and it was even worse when they brought it back. But there was a really funny scene where they were talking about like who they were going to pick, right? Who was going to eliminate it, who was going to make it, whatever it was. And someone was like, "Well, but this movie, I think this guy's making is going to sell." And I don't remember if it was Affleck or Damon was like, we don't care about if it's going to sell or not. We're not like, you're not Bob Weinstein sitting in his office, like with a cigar being like, I want to see a girl with big bosoms on the poster. Then I always think of it. It's like stuck in my brain is this like thing. Anyway, to go back to Alan Arkin for a second, it would have been insane if he had won that year, because Christoph Waltz won for Django Unchained that year.
Yeah.
So that would have been insane. Enough. The other nominees were Robert De Niro for Silver Linings Playbook, which really felt like oh my God, Robert De Niro was good in something again. If not even that, I don't think he's even like a standout in that movie, but I think
not at all.
He's good. He's not phoning it in. We got to nominate him. And Philip Seymour Hoffman for The Master, which is obviously a great performance, and Tommy Lee Jones for Lincoln, which is also a great performance.
Philip Seymour Hoffman's nominated for Best Supporting Actor for that. Well, I guess he is. Yeah.
Well, Phoenix, Joaquin would be the lead, right?
Yeah. But I don't know. It's a pretty big role.
It is a big role, but Joaquin Phoenix is nominated for lead that year.
Great movie.
Yes, great movie. Lincoln, also a great movie. People sleep on Lincoln a little bit. They think it's like a boring.
They think it's a war horse.
A drama. It's not. It's a lot of fun. Lincoln's a lot of fun. He's doing that crazy voice the whole time. Anyway, back to Argo. So they stage a reading of it, so that basically
this is the scene that I wanted to talk about.
I knew it was the scene you were talking about, so I wanted to get there.
Okay.
So they stage a reading with all these sort of, kind of second-rate actors, you assume, right? None of them have names, really, except for the witch or whatever, the space witch.
What a fun cameo. Adrienne Barbeau.
Yeah, Adrienne Barbeau, but, whoever she's supposed to be in the movie.
Yeah, Arkin's character's ex-wife.
Yeah, and,
which is a fun little bit there.
Know her. I was married to her.
Which made me think of John Carpenter. Well, anyway, another story for another day. Talked a lot about Carpenter and Adrienne Barbeau, other podcasts.
I do love when the reporter's talking to him. He's like, "What's the Argo?" And he's like, "It's the thing. It's the whole thing.
It's a spaceship. It goes all over the universe."
Yeah. So like the Argonauts. No, it's something different.
And that's the first time we get Argo fuck yourself.
Yeah, so we got Argo fuck
which
yourself.
Is used maybe one time too many. I really like it the first. If it's 4, I like the first 3, and the 4th is like, all right, we get it.
Yeah, I agree. It's like 1 or 2 times too many that they use it. It's really funny. It's hilarious the first time he says it.
It's not that clever. It's not as clever as we think it is. It's funny when Alan Arkin says it. It's funny when it comes back. Eventually, I get tired of it.
Yeah.
But this scene, I think it's a perfect encapsulation, much like the intro. But this scene also, it does kind of the same sort of thing where we're having the table read for this ridiculous science fiction movie, and the dialogue, the phony dialogue for this, like, we got to engage the thrusters and shit that, things you've heard in 1,000 movies. But we're also getting an Iranian woman who is basically reading the demands for the hostages and what they're going to do to the hostages. Mm-hmm. We're cutting back and forth between these two things. So it's the real situation where lives are at stake and in peril, as sort of juxtaposed with this very, very silly, it reminds me of, have you ever seen Star Crash? The Italian Star Wars ripoff Star Crash?
No, I've never seen it, no.
Oh, man. Most beautiful actress you'll ever see, Caroline Munro, and like the worst fucking movie ever made. Just a blatant ripoff of Star Wars that like could care less about anything resembling like a story or a good-looking special effect or anything like that. This movie reminds, the fake movie that they're making reminds me a lot of Star Crash. So we're cutting back and forth between this like insane ridiculousness. Actually, what it reminds me of is the great movie Gentlemen Broncos that you will never watch.
No, I'll never watch that movie.
It's about a science fiction writer that does this kind of stuff. But the way we're cutting back and forth between that and this very, very serious moment, that is shot, I don't think it's a real person, but it's shot, in the same way as the opening scene of the film is, where it looks like documentary, like archival footage of an actual, an Iranian sympathizer who's talking about, basically issuing a threat toward the hostages that sounds like a very real and palpable threat. It's a brilliant scene. It plays out so well, and it's it's both funny and harrowing at the same time. And I mean that is a very, very tough balance to strike, and I think he does it really, really well here.
Yeah, and so I mean I think it is actually a real person, because at the end they show those comparison photos of like the scene from the movie and the real scene that was really happened or whatever. And they have one where it's the shot from the movie and the real archival shot of that woman speaking into the microphone. So like listening to the demands or whatever that they have. So, it is actually a real person, but the,
No. But I mean, it's not the actual footage, right? Because
no.
Right.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. So
yeah,
it's
it's
a
not, yeah.
recreation of an actual.
It's a recreation. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So just to piggyback on that scene, one of the filmmaking things I really like there is the way they transition into that, which is they mentioned earlier that there's a lot of people, a lot of immigrants from that area, like the Middle East, who work in Hollywood, and you get this waiter who looks like he could be of Middle Eastern descent, right? Sort of like walking out of where they're doing their reading back into the kitchen. And in the kitchen is a TV playing this.
Yes.
Scene.
Yeah. Great. Great moment.
And I love, again, it's a very like directory moment, right? It's a very movie moment, but I think it's deployed really, really well. And it does, like you said, anchor these two things together in a way where they could feel totally separate, right? This script or the editing or Affleck's direction could go, the Hollywood scenes are the Hollywood scenes, and then we'll finish those, and then we'll cut back and we'll have our own couple scenes back in the more serious part. So we're not meshing these two disparate tones together, because some of the filmmakers would be afraid of that, right?
Agreed. I think it's a very ambitious choice. It's really gutsy, and he pulls it off.
Yes, he does pull it off. I wrote this down in my notes as well. It's a very, very well done scene. So basically they kind of nail down this, we got the little bit more of like the structural stuff that I can feel a little bit is there's like every two scenes, there's a new ticking clock that gets put on the characters that they have to fight against. And in this one, it's like, they're going to pick the teacher option tomorrow if you don't have this whole thing done by ready to go by tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah, I need another week. No, you got like 2 days, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how many times have we heard some variation of that line? Yeah.
Yes, and it happens a couple of times throughout the movie, right, where they're just like, it almost feels like Terry being like, not trusting just the momentum of this story, right? We already have the big ticking clock in our head, right? Which is, they're going to find out who these people are, and they're going to find them, right? They're going to find them, and they need to figure this out fast. When you start throwing too many sub-ticking clocks, it just starts to feel exhausting sometimes, because you're like, well, there's a new thing that I have to get my brain sort of wrapped around. So he figures it out. He goes back, and we have that scene with Philip Baker Hall and Bob Gunton. And I like the Cranston intro. He's like, it's like talking to the two old guys from the Muppets or whatever.
Yeah.
And I do like, he's like, we have a bunch of shitty options. This is our best shitty option.
This is our best bad idea.
Yeah. And I like that idea, because I think often that is what happens in these sort of like, whether it be the CIA or the FBI or whatever, it's like, when you've got a thing where you just have to do it, sometimes you don't get to the great idea, right? The best idea. You just have to pick the idea that, even though it doesn't seem like it's great, it has the best chance of working for all the ideas that you have. And I appreciate that about the concept that is put forward in this movie in that way.
Well, the thing that works about this plan is, one, that they've put everything in place where they've really set up a picture in Hollywood, but also there's nothing standing in the way. Like the thing with the teachers you mentioned before, like, yeah, that'd be a great idea, but they closed the school 6 months ago. This is the only plan that doesn't have some like genuine roadblock like that. Like the thing with the bicycles, that's the one. I think that's the one that in this moment, they're like, well, if you don't figure this out in 2 days, we're going to do the bicycle thing.
Yeah. No, it was the
I want to
teacher
see
thing.
that.
It was the teacher thing. They
Was
said
it?
they were going to do. Yeah.
They come back to the bicycle thing too. I want to see that movie.
Yeah. Well, Bob Gunton and Philip Baker Hall bring up the bicycle thing in that scene.
Have to escape on bicycles through like 300 miles of rough terrain. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. That's like a Men Who Stare at Goats type of scenario.
Was that movie good? I remember being good. I remember really liking it.
No, that movie. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I have not seen it since the theater, probably when I saw it in the theater.
Me either, but I remember really liking it back then. I
remember being really excited to see it and then being like, "Nah, it's okay." That's what I remember. Again, it was so long ago. So the plan's a go, and Tony goes to the Middle East. He starts in Turkey, right? That's where he kind of like meets with his British kind of counterpart, right? I don't know what that location is that they're in. I'm assuming obviously it's a real location and probably a very famous location.
Palace, yeah.
Whatever it is, stunning. Oh my God.
Absolutely.
I was like, this is like the cinematographer Prieto must have been like, oh my God, this is like a dream, you know? So much depth, so much interesting like dichotomy of sort of matte stone and shiny gold and like the hanging fixtures.
Oh, the chandeliers are fantastic.
Oh my God.
Not really an important scene in any way. Really doesn't do much for us at all.
All it does is establish the visa thing, right? He needs the visa. And this idea of the copy, right? The white copy, yellow copy, they have to match when you're leaving the country type of thing.
I do like the bit about that. It's like, so if they don't have the white copy, you're fucked. It's like, if they look. Yeah, if they look.
If they look. Of course they're going to look. Of course they're going to look. You know, but I like that, you know, we've got this, you know, we're sort of this is a very much an exposition scene, right? Where this British spy is sort of filling us in on everything that we might not know or have missed in like this time between the embassy scene and when he's entering Iran now. And I think, you know, we get our first scene as well. We also get our first scene, right, with sort of, I would call like, like the mid-level boss of like Middle Eastern officials, like trying to sniff through your bullshit. Like, because he goes to that first guy and the guy's like, why didn't you get your visa in Canada? And he's like, well, because my boss is like kind of an idiot or whatever. And he was like, okay, whatever. But, you know, it sets up this idea like these people. And I lived in the Middle East. I lived in Saudi Arabia when I was a kid. I was like from 4th grade to 6th grade, basically. And then again, I visited the Middle East again, probably about 10 years ago, for a project that I was working on with my job. And what this movie gets so right, and we'll talk about this more in the airport scene, the ending scene, is the unbelievable ability of these people who work in these institutions to pick out and sniff out bullshit so much. Like, it's crazy, right? Like, you know, it's just pretty amazing. And this movie does such a great job of capturing these things. I think I also said last show that my mother and grandfather were actually in Iran when the embassy fell and had to be like shepherded out in like the dark of night to the airport and sent home, basically. So like I have a lot of connection to this state of affairs in this part of the world in a lot of ways. And this movie gets so right so much of this stuff, which has always been very impressive to me because so many movies don't get this right. It's also
and what I was thinking about this, you know, not knowing your story and not really knowing whether this was realistic or not. But yeah, they are very, very good at their job. They're very, very fastidious about, you know, finding these false papers and things like that. And to me, like that's a tough pill to swallow because here in America, we've got the TSA. And my experience is, you know, those are not, well, I don't want to insult anyone, but, you know, I've had some experiences with them where I maybe did not have the most respect in the world for the person who was going through all my shit. And, you know, like this is the person that's supposed to find a bomb in my luggage when they're just like opening up my laptop and they don't even know how to like open the case and things like that. So I do think, and the movie does a good job of establishing that they are very competent in the way that, you know, your standard run of the mill airport security maybe isn't. I feel
Yes,
like I'm getting in trouble
absolutely.
just thinking this. I'm already talking shit about the CIA. Now I'm going
Yeah.
to TSA. I'm on somebody's watch list somewhere, but
Yeah.
I probably already was. But yeah, they all seem like just very, very, they are formidable enemies. They're formidable adversaries for these characters. And all of these scenes, like this bureaucratic bullshit, right? Like going through airport checkpoints, submitting the right paperwork, and just like looking through files. And, it's so tense in this movie, and it gets ratcheted up, but to the nth degree in the closing sequence when they're in the airport, and like
Yes.
every little thing, just the driver who's having a tough time starting the shuttle to get to the plane, like all of that stuff, that these little bureaucratic things where it's like, how could people not get through that in a sort of ordinary situation? I really like that. And this movie it's incredibly tense, even though we know the story. We know how this is all going to
Yeah.
play out. We know they're going to get away with it. Okay. And this plan is going to work. But in the moment, it's just, they really do seem like there's no way they're going to be able to just that scene with the spy that you mentioned, that one moment I really like, where he's like, they're going to look like
Yeah.
you're going to get caught. This plan is doomed from the start before you even meet these people. Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know that was real. I thought that was actually kind of invented for the movie.
No, not at all. And it's like, so he gets there, right? He gets to Iran, and I think just obviously this is just geopolitical reality, but the fact that you all you hear about the country is how it's so violent, everything's falling apart, and then but there are planes are still coming to the airport, cabs are still picking people up and bringing them to hotels. There is still like this functional society happening, even with everything around it being so tense and in such upheaval, right? And then we talked about a lot of these scenes already, which is when Affleck goes to meet them for the first time, sort of pitches them the idea. They're very resistant, right? And he then goes back to the hotel. He does some cool gadget stuff. I was all there for that when he was like doing this. He was like, opening up the thing and his little like phone radio thing, or whatever he was doing. I was like, this is cool. This is spy shit. I'm in for that. He talks to the cultural minister, right, and basically kind of pitches the idea of the movie to him.
That's a fun scene because the guy like immediately sees how stupid this movie is. Like, we're very interested in promoting the arts or something like that. Like basically saying like, we don't want to have this shit be made here.
Yeah, exactly. And then they set up this meet with them in the bazaar, right, in like the market, and immediately it's red flags, right, for the people, the actual six, right, who are hiding out.
Yeah, they have to show their faces in public for the first time.
Yes, and in like the most populated area of the city,
place, sure.
Yeah, and a place that they can easily get like disappeared, right, very easily in a place like this. This is they could someone could grab them in a group and they would never see them again, and you'd never know, right? So they think it's a setup, but basically, Mendez is like, we gotta go. Like if we don't go, you're all dead. They're gonna walk in here with machine guns, and they're gonna kill you, and they're gonna kill them, and it's gonna be over, right? And again, really like this scene. Very tense. The drive there is very tense, right? The market scene's very tense. When Carrie Bechet takes those pictures of the market, and that one sort of vendor sort of freaks out, I really enjoyed that they don't subtitle a lot of what is being said, right, from in the Farsi. They don't subtitle it.
Yeah.
And this and they have to kind of, you kind of getting it translated, right, by this like scared sort of interpreter who's like, he's saying this. But the pain on that actor's face, who was playing that shopkeeper, when he's saying like Americans, their support for the guy killed, my wife or whatever he says. I'm like, man, like that's one of those moments where I think a little bit probably of how Affleck and maybe Terrio, I don't know, really feel about like the geopolitical realities of this situation sort of push through, right? Where it's like, no, there's like this guy isn't just like being an uncivilized like mongrel, right? This is like a normal guy who had a family who something terrible happened to, and it was the United States' fault that it happened to them. And
this is one of those scenes the CIA maybe didn't have the most favorable opinion of.
Yeah, maybe not. you know, but it's done in a subtle enough way where you could, that, you know, it could get by them as well, right? In probably in a lot of ways, because, you know, it's not like anybody on the American side is like, you're right, we did something terrible. You know, it's just sort of left out there in the air.
And the guy is very threatening.
Yes, very threatening. And I mean, I think like even like the guy who comes and picks the cultural guy who comes and picks them up, who's like their guide or whatever, I thought he was very good. I thought, you know, he gave a good performance. I like that scene where he's talking to Tate Donovan. He's like, "Is this a foreign bride film?" And Tate was like, "What?"
Yeah, apparently that's a thing.
Yeah. Liked all that quite a bit. I'm gonna say what's next. And then we get that scene. We get that sort of concurrent scene where the housekeeper is at the house and she's at the gate, and that like Iranian guard or whoever it is comes and talks to her. And I love that they have a whole conversation and we don't understand a word of it. Right. So
yeah.
There's this tension you have where you're like, what are they saying? What is she saying? What is he saying? All of it, you have to garner all of it just from their facial and like physical performance, right? And that's the one where you realize like, oh, she's not giving them up, like, because
she's not going to sell them out. Yeah, we don't get that till the end of the scene though, and through most of the scene, I thought that's what you're going to say. Like, you know, it's the last 10% of it where she kind of shows her cards, and I really, it's a very tense scene also because she's been set up very much to be kind of the mole in the organization, and the fact that she's not that, I think it's just an interesting choice, whether it actually happened or not. I like that a lot. Yeah,
who knows if it happened or not, but I think it's a really nice filmmaking touch in that moment to have that tenseness in the scene. Because if you're subtitling it, you know, there's a different tension, right? The tension is you would immediately know that she was not selling them out, and then you'd be worried for her, right, the whole time, and it wouldn't really be about.
Well, it comes to one question at the end of their conversation: how long have they been here? And is it 6 months or 2 days? And she says 2 days. Yeah. Great moment. I thought that was great. I think that she was really great in that scene. I think the other actor in that scene is good as well. Yeah. And it really plays it out. And I like how it's building even more of this, tension around them, right? What there, you can feel the walls closing in without them saying it. The script does say it a couple of times in this moment, in these scenes as well, which I'm like, again, just back it off a little bit. We get it. All right. We're seeing all this stuff happen. We know like things are getting bad, right? We totally understand that things are headed this way. I'm not sure we need the subplot about the housekeeper at all, but maybe not. No, it gives us this scene, and this scene's pretty good. So. Yeah, it's a really good scene. Yeah. So then we get right now we add another wrinkle, which is that the CIA calls the government calls off the op in midway. Kyle Chandler, who I guess he's like the chief of staff or something. I don't understand who he is exactly. Yeah, he's not CIA. He's no, I think he's like chief of State Department, or he's chief of staff or something. But he basically says like, what the hell is this? Like, no, like who approved this? We're calling it off because now we're going in to get the hostages. So we actually want to just put these people basically into the embassy and have them be hostages again. And then we'll get them out, And it mostly, again, this is another time where I think it peeks through a little bit, where like the feelings of the filmmakers peek through, which is there's that line that they go like, basically, if we get caught at the airport pretending to be Canadians, it's going to really embarrass us. It's basically the reason why they're calling it off. Like these 6 people's lives are forfeit basically for us because like we don't want to be embarrassed by this op. Right. And then, I love that scene that Victor Garber his character knows, right? And they have that little scene together where he's like, just don't show up tomorrow. Like, don't tell them now. They're having fun. They're partying, and I don't want to freak them out. Before that though, we get this scene where he's kind of running them through, right? Like, what's your name? Where are you from? When's your birthday? What's your middle name? Boom, you're dead. That whole kind of scene, which I liked. I like that scene a lot. But it leads them when he takes that call, right? Reminds me a lot of that scene in Destroyer. Yeah, exactly. It's the undercover scene from that, very similar. Exactly. He, after he gets the call from Bryan Cranston, Clea Duvall comes in and she's like, we're ready to
ready to go again or whatever. And he goes like, you're fine. You did great. Like, just rest. Really, really good job. And she gets kind of like this like smile on her face. Like,
oh, I like that moment. Yeah. Like, okay, we might actually get through this.
and in that moment I was like, man, like Clea Duvall should be in more things. Like, she's so good in this very small part, but every time she has a little bit of a moment, to have a moment, she sticks. Like, she's sticky, she's sticky in your head. She's just a good performer, and good at playing a range of things. I don't say that, but everybody, like, if I didn't know who Tate Donovan was, like, he wouldn't be very sticky in this movie, right? He's not really giving you a lot in it, in his scenes. Neither is, I don't know who he is, the other white guy, younger guy who's not Scoot McNairy.
Yeah.
That guy, not really sticky.
Who is a known actor? Who
is he?
Yeah. Oh man, hold on.
Who is he?
He is. Hold on, it's his name I recognized. Schatz is the character's name. He's Rory Cochrane.
Rory Cochrane as Lee Schatz.
I've definitely seen
that's
him
the
in
cameraman.
stuff.
That's the cameraman. That guy, yes. That's he's in
No, that's the other guy in the house, right?
Yeah, but he's but he's the third younger white guy in the house. I'm talking about the guy they actually recognize, the guy kind of gets him caught.
Okay.
Is it this guy? Christopher Denham? I don't know. But anyway, that guy, exactly. It's like, who's this guy? Rory Cochrane's got some juice.
The kind of like European looking guy.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
The guy who was married to Clea Duvall's character or whatever. She goes, hopefully this isn't a terrible mistake. Or she talks, this is the worst idea since we got married or whatever it was. Or he says, I haven't been this nervous since our wedding day. And she goes, well, hopefully this isn't a disaster like that was or whatever.
That's a good scene early in the movie.
Rory Cochrane's got some juice. He's in what's that? Empire Records, right? Wasn't he in Empire Records?
Sure.
He's got a little bit of juice. And so, we get like the moment where Tony decides like, I'm going to go do this, right? I'm going to do this. I don't care. I think he said the thing is like, people are responsible for things or whatever he says to him when he calls him, I respond to people.
It's a third act. It's setting up a third act kind of moment.
Yes. But then we get into the closing 30 minutes or whatever of the movie.
And that third act is fantastic because it's just the escape from the airport.
Yes. And this is obviously, I think the rest of the movie is very good. This is, I think, the thing that like probably gets it over the edge.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right? Like, because it is a masterfully made ending sequence to the movie. It is incredibly tense without having a bullet fired, no one dies, but
and a large chunk of it is a dude showing silly storyboards for a science fiction movie to a security guard at the airport. That scene is so good. That's Scoot McNairy, right?
That's Scoot McNairy. And I was saying, this is why I wrote down what my idea about him being nominated. This is a huge scene for him. First of all, he's speaking a different language, right? So the whole thing's in a different language. He's so good in this scene. Like, he is selling it.
Yeah.
Like, 6,000% he's selling this. And once again, we're not getting a lot of subtitles. We're not getting a lot of like exactly what's being said. Like when they're sort of like pointing at the poster and obviously like pointing at Clea Duvall.
Stone face too. Like I really like the ambiguity of the scene, right? Like they could have played them much meaner. They could have played them much more aggressive, and they're not, right? They hear him out, and you have no idea. Like, are they going to just shoot this guy? Because
exactly.
He's talking a lot of bullshit, but he's pretty convincing about it. And I love. I mean, that is the character that really gets the arc here, right? Like he is the most untrusting one, and in this moment, he's like, well, this is my last chance. I better give it everything I've got. And I'm going to trust this guy. And their final scene together, him and Affleck, is fantastic too. But we'll get to that.
Really, really good. So in this scene, right, they do the really smart thing, which is, every screenwriter, every director will tell you before this happens, they lay out very clearly what is going to happen, what needs to happen to there to be a success in this plan, right?
This is in some sense a heist movie.
It is. This is like a reverse heist, basically.
Yeah.
But they just did a good job of doing that. So it's like, okay, I know there's 3 checkpoints. I know what each one of them is going to entail.
They're increasingly serious.
Yes. And I like that we have like a little bit of the chaos section, which is like Bryan Cranston being like, okay, they're going, so we gotta get everything set to go. Like nothing
secure their tickets. So yeah, the first obstacle is they go, and it's all these like little sort of minor things. Like they go to the ticket agent and she doesn't have their tickets, and it's like, oh, well, could you look again? And like in that moment, right? It's like, how is this going to come back? And we know, right? We know this is a movie. We know they're going to get through. We know they're going to get the tickets, but it's like, is it possible? Like there is that moment of disbelief there. Like, holy shit, there's no way they're going to make it through this. And I love that. Like, it's a sign of a very strong film that, you know, these foregone conclusions are not in the moment foregone at all.
Yeah. And this is when we get a little bit more Chris Messina on the CIA side, which was an actor I really enjoy.
He's in Live by Night, right?
I believe he is in Live by Night. Yeah. But I love that moment where he's like, you got to track down and looking for Kyle Chandler's character. He's like, how am I supposed to do that? He's like, we're a spy organization. He's like, figure it out. Like, you got to be able to find this super prevalent famous
that's great
man.
that they call him and say they're from his kid's school.
Yeah. And then, you know, what I do like too is in that moment, again, this is a little bit more of the jingoistic stuff, right? Where it's like, okay, well, now that people are really just on the line right at this moment, we'll spring into action and put it through, right? But the tickets get put through, you know, and then we get that passport scene where like the guy's looking at the passport and, you know, checking their passports. And that scene, with the way that guy looks at the passport photo and just stares at the person. I've been in that exact situation in these, especially when you're in a Middle Eastern country where, to be fair, the likelihood of an aggression happening or something bad happening is much higher than it is in an airport here, right? They stare at you in a way where you begin to doubt that you are the person that you say you are, right? It's like, I can totally understand why someone who is faking something or lying or whatever could get caught up in this and get broken down by this. When I was the project I worked on, we were shooting like a documentary, and we went overseas, and so we were leaving with all this film equipment, and like it was in these giant, like they look like rocket launcher cases, right?
Yeah.
And the people are like, why do you have this stuff? We're like, well, we were shooting this thing, blah, blah, whatever. And they're like, well, why wouldn't they hire a local company to do that? And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. You know, like they hired us, and it was really, it's a little bit scary, you know, like you get like this feeling. And so that was a totally, you know, this wasn't a situation where, you know, the Republican Guard was like going to find a shredded up picture of me and, you know, call me into the police, you know? So that's
you were a suspicious character.
Yeah. So it was really tense. And so the scene plays really real. And then, you know, we get the scene with the paper or whatever. And always says like, if you believe that they lost the paper, they'll believe it. Right. Yeah. So like you have to believe that you lost the paper, that they lost the paper. Right. But I like the way they take down him and plays it in that scene, because he doesn't play it like, what are you talking about? He just plays it like, I don't know what you're like, what? Like obviously I don't even know what to say, because like obviously we came here, you know, like I like that quite a bit. And then of course we get like the big scene with Scoot, which I think is so good. And then we get you know, a little bit of this is like the one thing that's unclear, right? Is I'm like, man, I guess like even these police can't just run out onto the tarmac, you know, if they, in this basically police state, they can't run out on the tarmac with, you know, they can't break FAA regulations or, you know, whatever is happening here, because they have to like shoot through that glass, you know, and break out and run.
There's definitely some third act action movie contrivances in the scene, but man, in the moment though, like you're so on the side of these characters, you so want them to get out, and you know they're going to, but the tension that's been built up to this point, I think, is still pretty palpable in the sense that the sigh of relief at the end of that Scoot McNairy and the storyboard scene is, you know, I think that carries you through the rest of it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that, but I love how like understated it is. Where he says like, they say we can go. Like, it's not like this big declaration, I like that.
No, and there's a great moment later where they're just kind of looking at him after the fact, just like going through the storyboards, like,
Yeah.
look at this stupid American bullshit.
Yeah. You can keep those or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. They leave them with them, which is a great moment.
Yeah. And I wasn't even talking about like that it gets too action movie when they're coming out. It's just like, I'm like, I don't understand the rules of this country, I guess, because like,
but that's what I'm saying. I mean, I think they probably would have been able to get out there in real life, but
I mean,
that whole
what really
scene,
happened, I have no idea, so
I don't think it was quite as action packed intense.
I don't think
as what
so
we get
either.
here.
I love that the pilot is just like, there's like 4 police cars and a military truck.
But I do really like that bit when they get on the shuttle and the guy just can't start the shuttle.
Oh yeah, that's great.
He's trying to shift it into, into gear and it won't go. That moment where they're just on the shuttle, because, I don't travel as much as you do, but I do. And like you're always talking in one of those situations, right? Like, and they all have to be just kind of stone-faced, sitting there, staring at each other like, holy shit, like we might die here. And it's so unlike, everyone's experience of being on an airport shuttle and you've got your luggage and you're just BSing with the people that are with you, that kind of thing. And they're all great in that scene. Like, it's the last time we really get to see them all kind of together.
Yeah. They got in the plane, there's a moment where they're like, okay, they took off and the CIA guys are like, wait. And then we get the, ladies and gentlemen, we're now serving alcoholic beverages. We've left Iran airspace. And that's like
airspace. Yeah.
And that's like the relief moment. And we get hugging. I imagine, I'm trying to imagine the other people on the plane's like perspective on these 6 people, like jumping for joy and hugging each other when they leave Iranian airspace.
And there was no sympathizers. I mean, I guess this actually happened, but like, wouldn't you think there'd be some people who would be keeping an eye on them and be like, oh, these are those people.
But I think you're out of like, they're out of reach at that point. It's not like, and they're not, I don't think they're going to put sympathizers on every plane that leaves. You know what I mean? It's not like,
no, I just mean it's a plane leaving that country and going somewhere else. So wouldn't the odds be that there'd be someone who was,
maybe
concerned that these people are there?
But how would they even know who they were? There's no way they would know. It's not like there's social media. It's not like they're opening their iPhones and being like, look.
Yeah. What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. You mentioned this, the final scene between Scoot and Tony.
Wordless moment. Again, Chris Terrio, great screenwriter. R.I.P. that guy's career.
Yeah.
But yeah, he kind of just goes up to him and looks him in the eye and shake hands. Like, it's great. I mean, it's exactly what it needs to be. He's a great actor, Scoot McNairy. I'm sure if there was some dialogue there, he would have pulled it off really nicely. But
doesn't need to be dialogue, though.
We don't need it. We don't want it.
No.
It's just this great, the story is resolved, the relationship is resolved, and it's just this, 2 very smart people who had kind of differing opinions, kind of coming to a consensus. And I like it.
Yeah.
I like the way that plays out a lot.
Me too. Then we get the idea that, right, Affleck keeps a storyboard when he breaks some sort of international regulation and keeps the storyboard.
Just sticks it in his bed. Yeah, he's returning it to the Raiders of the Lost Ark room. Where they keep all the stuff. And just like the guy looks away for a half a second and he somehow secrets it into his bag and gives it to his son, which becomes part of his like sci-fi movie toys collection. Yeah. Nice little cute moment at the end.
Like being real secure there in the CIA.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
what's it matter?
Tony Mendez is going to get this, the intelligence star, which is like a secret, sort of.
Oh, I like that bit too. Yeah. Oh, we're going to have a reception for you and everything. You're like, nobody's going to know. Yeah, nobody's going to know.
Yeah, nobody's going to know. Yeah. So they're giving me an award and then just taking it back or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's the end of that. And then, he goes back to his house, and then Taylor Schilling is his wife, his ex-wife or his wife or whatever. Orange is the New Black, Taylor Schilling.
Yeah.
Which I was like, well, that's, I mean, again, she wasn't anybody when this movie came out, but it's just one of those weird things where you're like, this person's going to be like super famous in a year, basically, which was kind of crazy. And then we get that, but again, she's with his son, and this is one of the things where it's just like a little too cute. It's a little too cutesy, where it's like we get like 4 shots of his sci-fi collection or whatever, and I'm like, why are we doing this? And then the last shot is the Argo like storyboard on his shelf, and I'm like, okay, like I was not watching this movie for like the emotional resolution between Tony and his son. Tony isn't really like a a person, right? Like a full character in this movie, right? He has a function and a job, but I'm not like invested in like his domestic life, basically.
No, and they're separated, but they're not divorced or anything.
Yeah.
And it's almost feel like, you know, you mentioned it's Taylor Schilling. Maybe there was a scene that got cut out earlier on that kind of just shows some marital conflict going on there. But like I thought he was estranged from his son just because he's working. You know, he has a very important job. So I don't know.
He kind of just said like, we're taking a break. That's what he said, right? She's living in Virginia or whatever, you know? So yeah, the idea was they were not divorced or whatever. They just were taking a little bit of a separation. And you get the sense from that last scene, right? That it was always because of him, right? It wasn't because she wanted them to be separate. It was because he was making it be so or whatever. But yeah, it's just part of like, I could have done with like the ending, which is the Cranston and Affleck scene being the last scene of the movie. And I think it would be fine. And I like there's like a Jimmy Carter, like actual like voiceover or whatever, like underneath the credits, which I thought was kind of interesting. Again, I don't need it.
I gotta mention, I watched this on Amazon Prime, and you know, with Prime, you can pause the movie and it shows you like the actors, the names of the actors, the X-ray. Yeah. So for this movie, it was like a little out of sync, but like every time I hit pause, it was like Ayatollah Khomeini as himself and Ben Affleck as Tony Mendez. It's like, wow, that's had no idea those two were in a movie together. Known actor, the Ayatollah Khomeini.
I would say this movie did not do the thing right where it cast an actor as a really famous world figure, right? It didn't.
No. There's we hear from Jimmy Carter, we hear from the Ayatollah in this movie, but it's just it's archival stuff, and I really like that choice.
Even like, you know, Ted Koppel, Dan Rather, whoever the news reporters are, we don't get like an actor doing that.
There's almost no way to do that well. So I think
there's not, but a lot of movies would just do that. You know, a lot of movies would do that.
Ted Koppel wig be fun, but
get Daryl Hammond in there playing.
Sure.
Ted Koppel. Oh yeah. So that's Argo. That's Argo, our best picture winner for that year. Like I said before, again, Affleck is taking this trajectory. Well liked but underseen first movie. Well liked and more seen second movie. A bona fide hit with his second movie. And I mean, this movie is a big ass hit, right?
Prestige pick, best picture winner, sure.
Opens to $20 million, ends up making $136 million domestically, $232 worldwide. You know, loved by critics, wins the best picture Oscar.
So I don't know that I want to go back a little bit because you said this movie has kind of gotten worse for you in some sense. Is it just kind of the stuff we've talked about already, or
I think
what's your gripe with Argo?
Affleck's performance for me really stood out for me this time around. Those sort of, I think, a little bit, like I said, too cutesy and too screenwritery sort of construction moments in the movie. You know, I think while it has really good lines, I think seeing it this time, some of the banter didn't hit as strong for me as the first time I saw it. I was like, all this Hollywood stuff is hilarious, you know? And then this time I was like, not as taken by it. Right. I was kind of like, it felt just a little bit too like, we got jokes to throw at each other. Like that it just stood out a little bit more to me. I was like, I can appreciate this is a clever line. It's a well-written line, but I just, for whatever reason, it didn't sing for me the way it did the first time.
Interesting, because I remember the first time having kind of that reaction to it. Like I enjoyed the Iran stuff, and the Hollywood stuff I thought was a little on the nose and a little bit, you know, just Hollywood doing its Hollywood thing where it's making fun of itself in a very gentle sort of way. And I still think that, you know, it's certainly not a self-lacerating take on what the movie business is. But I don't know, like seeing it the second time, it's a furiously entertaining movie, and I think it's a very well made movie, and it's a very well written movie, and you know, contrivances aside, and you know, historical inaccuracies very much aside, and I think, you know, there's plenty of things that you could say about this movie not really being true or fair to the actual story. However, it's such a great watch, and maybe, you know, we've talked about this so many times about these types of movies that don't really exist anymore. Like this is a television miniseries now. It's a streaming thing on Paramount Plus or something. And
this is like an Apple TV written all over.
Very, very much an Apple TV thing. And I kind of missed this as a movie, and I had such a good time with it. Like I enjoyed it so much. I really did feel the tension of those scenes, you know, with the hostages, and I really laughed a lot, throughout this. I mean, I did really enjoy the banter, and I'm not an Aaron Sorkin guy. I'm not a Studio 60 fan. I mean, I don't hate it. It's just not really my thing. But I felt like that stuff just worked. So, the walk and talk stuff in this movie was just like so snappy and so fun and so entertaining, and cut together with other stuff that was really compelling for other reasons. Like, yeah, I mean, this is a 4-star movie for me.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're not that far off on it, right? This is probably a 3.5-star movie for me, right?
Okay.
And the other two I think are 4-star movies for me. So, and this is out of 5 for me, by the way. This is once again to remind.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking about out of 4.
Oh, that's crazy, but never. 3.5. It's like a 7 out of 10. Oh, really?
Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars too.
Look, I'm not. So you're not like alone. Obviously, it won Best Picture. So you being like this is a 4-star movie is not crazy, But for me, it's just this is what I think it's the best directed, like from a filmmaking perspective, as far as his ambition and what he's trying to do. Like like we talked about throughout this conversation, the really big swings he takes. And
he's showing a lot of growth here.
Cool choices he's making.
And
yes,
he's made 2 good movies at this point, and now he's really, I think he's taken a step even further.
I just think, again, movies judged on what they're trying to do inside of itself, right? I feel like it's a little less successful to me than the other two. Still, a 3.5-star movie is a movie I would watch 10 times. So I'm not. This is not like again, saying this movie is bad. It's not bad at all. I think I think as evidence for what I've said about it, I think it's really, really good. But like I said, this trajectory has gone up. He's taken the steps. The next one is gonna keep going up, right, Nick?
It's a great book.
Next week is
What Could Possibly Go Wrong?
Next time is Live by Night, which is the only one of his movies I have not seen. So I'm kind of.
Yeah, now I'm completely in uncharted territory. I haven't seen either of these two, so it should be interesting.
I feel like Air is going to be we're going to like Air more, judging by the reaction to Live by Night, like in comparison. But I'm excited to watch it.
I want to, I mean, I'm sure it's not going to happen, but we've talked about this before. Like, I want to champion underdog movies sometimes. Like, I still haven't seen Megalopolis as of the recording of the show, but I want to watch that movie and think it's brilliant and tell everybody I know it's brilliant, and they could be like, "You're crazy, you're an asshole." And it's the Southland Tales of its day. I love Southland Tales. I
love Southland Tales though.
That's just cool. I'm glad we agree on that one.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Is there a possibility that Live by Night is an unheralded classic from this great director, the director of Argo and The Town and Gone Baby Gone? It could be.
The thing is, I don't think that Live by Night is an underdog movie. I just think it's a movie that came out and people didn't like. You know what I mean? Like, that's just what it is. It's not like a Megalopolis where, he sold his winery to make like the last movie of his life or whatever, that's a whole other vibe, Again, I don't know. When I think of the movies you're talking about, I think of movies like Megalopolis, Southland Tales, Babylon is another one I think of in this sort of like vein that you're talking about. I still need
to see Babylon. I will bet I would love Babylon.
Listen, man, I watched Babylon the first time and I was like, fuck this movie. And then I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I watched it again and I was like, yeah, this thing is like a little too long and it's like too up its own butt in certain places. But in other ways, it's genius. And I was like, I would love to see so many more people just take this kind of swing, with movies.
See, I'm not sure Live by Night is that.
That's what I mean. I don't feel like it's like, well, can you believe that Ben Affleck made a noir movie based on a popular book? It's like, that doesn't like sing to me. Like, this ambition is just out of control, So, in fact, I mean, what I've heard about it is that it's strikingly unambitious in a lot of ways. So, but I do hear there's some really fantastic sequences. So that's what I'm kind of holding on to going into it for next time, is that I hear there's a couple sequences that are just like really incredibly directed. So,
well, I mean, Dennis Lehane too, like his track record with movies, Gone Baby Gone, Mystic River, which is great. Shutter Island, which I don't like, but a lot of people really like. And what else? There's maybe one more.
Is there other movies that Dennis? I mean, we'll probably talk about this next week when we talk about.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering, so he's 3 out of 4 at least.
I mean, yeah, that depends how you feel about like some of those movies. But,
like I said, there's one of them I really don't like, but it's a well-regarded movie. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe this is
I
better
like everything
than,
about
than
Shutter
people.
Island, but the end of Shutter Island.
Well, same here.
Yeah.
But the end is bad enough that it kind of ruins everything else.
I
for
mean,
me.
the end is just that type of ending that I think you and I both are kind of allergic to. I think that's really what it is. You know, it's that kind of twist that can really sour you on a movie, which I totally get. Like I felt that way so many times. It looks like Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, Shutter Island, some movie called The Drop with
that's a short
Tom
story,
Hardy?
which I've always wanted to see. Yeah,
is that Tom Hardy? James Gandolfini and Tom Hardy?
yeah. It's one of James Gandolfini's last movies.
What the hell?
Yeah, it's a little crime drama thing, and I've heard it's very good. So yeah, that's another one that I think is.
So we'll see. I mean, I have complicated thoughts about a lot of his. I think I have complicated feelings about Mystic River, but that's more in like I think a performance-wise than a story-wise thing. You know what I mean? There's some over-the-top stuff in Mystic River.
I love the over-the-top stuff in Mystic
I'm
River.
just saying that's just my personal vibe with it. I'm not nothing against the movie. Maybe one day we'll talk about Clint. And do those 7,000 movies that he directed. But next week, we're going to do Ben Affleck's adaptation of Dennis Lehane's novel, Live by Night. You can follow us on intrepidfilmographers.com. Subscribe to us on any of your podcasting platforms of choice. Please rate and review us. It really, really helps get the podcast out there. Let us know how you're feeling about it too. You know, you can comment, on intrepidfilmographers.com. Leave us comments, questions. We'd love to hear from you. But until then, thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you to everybody who's listening. Until next time, be good to one another. Later.